Story 1. The tunnel that didn't end. When it should have. This happened to me in the summer of 2018. I was driving across Pennsylvania with two friends. We were taking back roads on purpose, not because we were lost, but because we wanted the trip to feel old school. Paper maps, no GPS. We even turned our phones to airplane mode, just for the challenge of it. The plan was to take Route 219 down through the Alleghenies and stay overnight at a cheap motel somewhere around the state line. I was behind the wheel that afternoon, and by dusk, we were already deep into the National Forest area. Somewhere past 9 p.m., we hit a tunnel. I don't know what the name was, and none of us remember seeing a sign. But it didn't feel unusual at first. Just a long two-lane mountain tunnel. Damp concrete, amber lights overhead. It was quiet inside, no traffic in either direction. The only sound was the tires humming against the pavement. The tunnel didn't curve, it just kept going straight. At first, we were joking around, making fun of how endless it felt. "Where's the exit?" Jonah said. He was in the back seat, scrolling through the playlist. No one answered him. I think all of us were starting to feel it at the same time. I glanced at the odometer. We'd been inside the tunnel for 7 minutes. I slowed down slightly, just enough to stop feeling like we were floating. The weird part was that the tunnel didn't change. No signage, no curve, not even the hint of an opening ahead. Usually, even in the longest mountain tunnels, you can start to see a speck of daylight, or at least a bend. But there was nothing. Just those identical overhead lamps and the same strip of reflective yellow paint down the middle. And I noticed something. The paint looked new. Not just clean, new, unblemished, uniform, like it had been sprayed that morning. 10 minutes passed, no exits, no mile markers. The lights above us didn't flicker. They didn't even buzz. Just the same dull glow at perfect intervals. By then, no one was talking anymore. We were all just watching the road. I looked in the rear view. Jonah had stopped scrolling. He was staring straight ahead. Next to me, Paige shifted in her seat. "Do you remember seeing the tunnel on the map?" she asked. I didn't. I hadn't even remembered there being elevation changes that would have required one. I reached for the glove box, pulled out the folded map we'd been using. It shook a little in my hands, not because the car was moving, but because I was. There was no tunnel marked anywhere near that stretch. "We missed something," I said. "We must have taken a wrong turn." Jonah leaned forward between the seats. "We didn't. I've been watching the route since the gas station. We stayed on 219. The only thing that changed was the road, and not by much. The lines were still there. The tunnel walls still damp and stained, the ceiling lights still perfectly spaced. But the air felt thicker, like we'd dropped in elevation or gained it. It was hard to tell. Our ears hadn't popped. We weren't tired. But something was wrong with the space around us. I blinked and glanced at the dashboard clock. It said 9:42. When we entered the tunnel, it was 9:27. We'd been inside for 15 minutes. "I haven't seen a sign this whole time," Paige said. Jonah opened the window. No sound, just a dead hum, like the air was static. That's when I noticed something else. The paint. It didn't look worn, no tire streaks, no oil stains. It was glossy, fresh, and most unsettling of all, identical in thickness across the entire visible stretch. I slowed the car to 30. Still nothing ahead. No other cars, no end, just darkness behind and ahead, and a tunnel that obeyed all the rules of a tunnel, except one. It didn't end. "Should we turn around?" Jonah asked. I didn't answer. I didn't want to. The tunnel was too narrow to make a full U-turn. And besides, if something was wrong, I didn't want to go back through it. We kept going. I looked at the clock again. It still said 9:42, but we'd been in that tunnel longer than a minute. "I think the clock stuck," Paige whispered. She was right. I tapped the dash. It didn't change. Jonah pulled out his phone and turned off airplane mode. No signal. Not even the time updated. We were suspended, not moving through space, but through something else. I tightened my grip on the wheel and pressed the gas just a little harder. We didn't talk again for what felt like another 10 minutes. Then, without warning, the tunnel ended. No warning sign, no gradual increase in light, no rumble strips or incline. Just a sudden, sharp emergence into black night air. We were back under the stars, surrounded by trees. The road curved slightly to the left. Paige exhaled, a single involuntary breath like she'd been underwater. Jonah whispered, "That took more than 15 minutes. I checked the clock. It blinked. 9:45. I glanced at my phone. It read 9:42. We didn't say a word the rest of the way to the motel. The motel was small, 2 stories, half lit. A tired neon sign flickered somewhere above the check-in office. There were only 3 cars in the lot. We didn't check in right away. We just sat in the car. Engine off. Lights dimmed. None of us spoke. I checked my watch. 9:48. Then I looked at the dashboard again. Still 9:45, 3 minutes off. That might not seem like much, but all 3 of us had synced our watches before leaving the last gas station. A weird habit we had for these road trips. It was a running joke. Military precision, Jonah called it. We each checked again. Jonah's phone now showed 9:42. Paige's was 9:45. Mine, 9:48. "How does that happen?" Paige said. "No way, that was just the car clock," I murmured. "Mine was synced." It jumped forward. Jonah checked the time zone settings. Everything was still correct. We should have felt relieved to be out of the tunnel, but the strangeness hadn't stopped. The sky above us was darker than it should have been. There were no stars visible, only a soft grey smear behind thin clouds. No wind. Just a dead stillness that made the parking lot feel staged. I remember opening my door and stepping out, half expecting the air to feel different. And it did. It was warmer than before, slightly humid, like we'd skipped ahead a few hours into a summer night that wasn't ours. Paige walked to the edge of the lot and stared out toward the road. She didn't say anything. Jonah stood by the trunk, looking at his reflection in the rear window. Then he asked, "Does that tree look familiar to you?" We looked. Across the road, maybe 20 feet away, was a large white pine, slanted slightly, with a bare patch on its left side. "I saw that same tree when we got off the highway," he said. "No," I said. "That can't be." But he was already pulling out the paper map, unfolding it on the trunk. "Look, we turned off Route 219 back at the gas station, right? Onto Fern Hollow Road. Then we hit that fork before the bridge." He traced the route with his finger. The motel should have been south of the tunnel, not back near the highway entrance. Somehow, we'd come out behind where we entered. Not ahead. Paige looked back at the car. "That's not possible. We didn't make a turn. We didn't even stop." "I know," Jonah said. I looked at the odometer. We'd added 7 miles during the tunnel stretch, but by the map, the 2 ends of the tunnel, if they existed, should have only been 3 miles apart. So where did the extra miles come from? And how did we end up back near the beginning? The clock was now ticking forward again. 9:53. 3 minutes had disappeared. But they hadn't been skipped. They'd been relocated. Not enough time to accuse the world of being wrong, just enough to make us question everything else. We checked in, slept with the blinds closed, and didn't talk about it again until the next morning. Even then, none of us knew how to phrase it. It wasn't until the following spring that I found the photo. I was staying with my cousin in Vermont, digging through some old boxes of road trip memorabilia he'd kept in the attic. He used to ride motorcycles back in the day, long solo rides through the Northeast, snapping Polaroids and pasting them into binders. One of the binders was labeled Pennsylvania, 86. I flipped through it out of boredom. Then I saw it. A photo of a tunnel, straight, narrow, with amber lights on the ceiling spaced like teeth in a jaw. 2-lane road, fresh yellow center line, damp concrete walls, the same tunnel. I froze. Under the photo, written in blue ballpoint pen, weird light patterns, 20-min tunnel, 9:40 p.m. I stared at that scribble for a long time. The date in the corner, August 1986. I texted Jonah. He called me immediately. "You're not joking?" "No." We scanned the image, trying to match details. The guardrails at the entrance, the curvature of the wall, the lamp spacing. It matched exactly. Paige called 2 days later. She hadn't spoken to either of us in months. Her voice was thinner, like something had been bothering her. "I had a dream," she said, "except I think it was a memory." She described a part of the tunnel we never mentioned. A blue graffiti tag halfway up one wall, near the right shoulder. She said she saw it, over and over again, like we kept passing it. I remembered it too, but only when she said it. "Do you think we went in circles?" she asked. I didn't answer. Later that night, I searched for tunnel phenomena, found a reference on an obscure message board, archived from 2009. Someone had written, "Avoid the straight tunnel near Fern Hollow. Local surveyors say it messes with compasses. Locals call it the drift zone." Another reply, "My dad worked DOT in the 80s. That tunnel was never finished. There's only one entrance." I never found confirmation of that post. No official records, nothing on satellite imagery. But the three of us remember the same 15-minute drive that didn't align with any road. We weren't the first to disappear for 3 minutes, and we won't be the last. Did you enjoy the content and it made a difference for you? Click on Super Thanks and support our work. Story 2. The Hitchhiker Who Asked for a Ride to Nowhere. This happened to me in early November 2016. I was driving west through Nevada on a solo stretch of US 50, the part they call the loneliest road in America. If you've never driven it, imagine an endless ribbon of 2-lane blacktop cutting through dry basins and high desert, surrounded by low mountains that always seem farther away than they actually are. No cities, just occasional gas stations, faded motels, and signs that seem deliberately vague. I was heading to Carson City from Ely, a last-minute decision. The kind of drive you take when you don't really want to be anywhere in particular. I left just after 3 p.m., figuring I could make it most of the way before dark, but I misjudged the distance and the silence. After nightfall, US 50 changes. It's not just empty, it feels suspended, like you're driving through the pause between two places that don't want to be connected. I hadn't seen another car in over 45 minutes when I noticed the first mile marker. I remember it because I glanced at the number without thinking and made a mental note. 271 miles to somewhere. But the thing about those signs is, once you start looking, you can't stop. They become a measure of your movement, a way to remind yourself that you're making progress. 3 minutes later, 270, then 269. Then nothing for a while, just my headlights carving through the dark. When I passed mile marker 271 again, I thought I was mistaken. Maybe I had looked at it wrong the first time, or maybe it was numbered for the opposite direction. Some of those signs do that, show distance from both ends, but then I saw 270 again. Same angle, same spacing, same dent in the post, and I knew I hadn't turned around. I pulled over, killed the engine, and sat there. The desert night is silent in a way you don't really understand until you hear it. It doesn't buzz, it doesn't hum, it just waits. I got out, stretched, and walked to the shoulder. The cold was biting, dry and sudden. I checked my phone. No service, no GPS. I opened the map in the glove box. My finger traced the route again. Ely, Austin, Fallon, a straight line west. No loops, no forks. But I had seen the same sign twice. 3 times, maybe. I drove on, trying to shake the feeling. Then I saw him. A figure standing on the shoulder just past a shallow bend. He didn't wave. He didn't step forward. He just stood there with one arm down, the other holding something long against his side. A duffel bag or maybe a coat. I slowed without meaning to. There was no reason to stop. I didn't know him. He wasn't in trouble, but something about the way he was positioned made it feel like I'd already made the decision before I had time to resist it. I pulled over 10 yards ahead of him. My passenger window was down halfway when he stepped up to the door. He leaned in slightly, just enough for me to see his face. Older, maybe late 50s. Deep lines across his forehead. He was wearing a faded grey coat and a black hat pulled low, shadowing most of his features. He didn't smile. "Where you headed?" I asked. "Wherever you are," he said. I thought he'd misheard me. But then he walked around the front of the car and opened the rear passenger door. Sat down slowly. He didn't ask, he didn't wait. I told myself this was fine. A strange but tired man hitching a ride in the desert. It happened. But something felt off immediately. The air inside the car was colder, not cooler, colder. Like I'd opened a window to a deeper place. He didn't speak again. He just sat there, staring forward, hands on his knees. I glanced at him through the rearview mirror. His hat was still low, his posture stiff. But something else caught my eye. The scenery outside, the terrain itself, looked mirrored. I'd driven this stretch already. The same scrubby outcroppings, the same clusters of yucca, even a sun-bleached billboard, missing half its letters. All now on the opposite side of the road. As if the route hadn't looped, but inverted, like we'd entered the other half of a reflection. I tried to tell myself it was a trick of the landscape. But then the signs came again. Mile marker 271, then 270, then again 271. On the left side of the road, I checked the dash. The time hadn't changed in almost 10 minutes. I adjusted the mirror slightly. He was still back there, hands folded, silent, but his coat looked darker now, or maybe the fabric was just reacting to the air. I kept driving. The next sign I saw didn't have a number, just a single word, reverse, painted in red, not on the post, but spray painted directly onto the asphalt, upside down, like it was meant to be seen in a mirror. The next 20 minutes passed in fragments, the kind where you're conscious of each second, but somehow unable to measure them. I checked the mirror again. He was looking down now, his hands still clasped, but his hat, the black wool hat, was gone. I blinked, looked back again, still no hat. Then I glanced in the rearview mirror once more. He was wearing it again. I turned around in my seat just slightly, trying not to make it obvious. Hat still on. I turned forward, breathed, glanced at the mirror again. Hat gone. I didn't say anything, not out loud, just kept my hands on the wheel. The speedometer hadn't moved. The road looked exactly the same gradient, same curves. There was no incline, no dips. The car was gliding over identical terrain, like a film reel looping one scene with subtle changes. The man coughed once, low, hollow, then silence again. I adjusted the mirror. His mouth didn't move, but I heard a whisper. "You passed it." I didn't ask what he meant. I just kept driving. My knuckles were pale against the steering wheel, my jaw tight. I glanced again. Now his hat was in his lap, but in the mirror, still on his head. I turned on the overhead dome light, hoping the extra illumination would anchor something, anything. The moment I did, the car's interior lit up slightly. But the mirror didn't change. His reflection stayed in shadow. No light touched him there. He coughed again, louder this time. "Turn around." I pulled off to the shoulder without thinking. The tires bumped over the dirt edge. I looked back. He was facing forward. In the mirror, he was looking at me. Expression blank. No emotion, just eyes that didn't move. "Why?" I asked. "What is this?" He tilted his head in the mirror, but not in the seat. Like the version of him in the reflection was no longer following the same posture. "I just wanted to get where you were going," he said, "but you're not going anywhere. And neither are you." That wasn't a threat. It sounded like a fact. I started the engine again, pulled back onto the road, and drove. Another mile, another duplicate sign. Reverse. I pressed harder on the gas, but the landscape wasn't changing. I checked the gas gauge. It hadn't moved in over 50 miles. I learned about it later, a thread on an old cryptozoology forum, buried beneath posts about forest disappearances and phantom roads. One entry stood out. Ever heard of the directionless one? Some people call it the eraser. Old Navajo and Paiute legends talk about a being that appears when travelers no longer know where they are. A guide that doesn't guide, just rides with you until you forget where you were headed. I hadn't forgotten my destination, but I hadn't known it either. Not really. The longer I drove, the less I felt like I was in Nevada. The road had narrowed. The markings were gone. No centerline, no signs. Just tire tracks on packed dirt. I stopped the car, not because I wanted to, because the road ended. Just a shallow basin ahead, surrounded by sparse trees. No sound, no stars, only a faint pulsing glow behind the car. I looked at the mirror. He was gone. I turned around. The back seat was empty. No door had opened. No sound. Just absence. I stepped out into the night. The sky was blank, not overcast. Blank, no movement, no shape. Like a sheet of dark grey skin pulled over the world. Behind me, that faint light pulsed in the distance. Not a car, not a building, just a single pale orb, like an inverted moon, flickering gently at the horizon. I stood there for maybe 10 minutes. Then I got back in the car. The gas gauge was still full. The odometer hadn't changed. I turned the car around. The road behind me wasn't the one I came on. It was just a narrow trail through hard-packed dirt. No markings, no signs. Only the memory of a man who didn't move the way his reflection did, who never asked where we were going, only where we weren't. Story 3. The motel that wasn't on any map after they left. This happened in late October 2014. 3 of us were driving back from a camping trip in the Catskills. It had rained all night the evening before, and we left our site a day early, mostly because none of us wanted to spend another night in damp clothes and muddy boots. The plan was to head west toward Buffalo and stay the night somewhere cheap before splitting ways the next morning. Around 5:30 p.m., we got off the main highway looking for a place to grab food. We were near a tiny town called Roxbury, one of those villages with a single post office, 2 closed gas stations, and a diner that looks like it hasn't been open since the 80s. We drove past the town, hoping to find something off the side roads. The sun had dipped low, and the light had that murky tint it gets before total dark. Fog moved in without us noticing, not thick but low and wet, enough to soften everything in the distance. Eventually, we saw a blue roadside sign. Larkspur Motel, 1 mile ahead. Vacancy. There was nothing else around. No cars, no shops. Just that sign and a narrow gravel road that split from the main one like an old scar. I was driving. Sean was in the passenger seat and Ali was in the back, curled up in a blanket. We took the turn. The road dipped immediately, curving through a dense thicket of trees. The gravel beneath us turned muddy quick. It hadn't rained in a few hours, but the mud still clung thick to the wheels. You could hear it sloshing beneath the undercarriage. About a mile down, the trees broke, and there it was. A long, low building with a sagging roof and a faded sign over the office door. Larkspur Motel. The whole lot was packed earth. Muddy, but undisturbed. That's the part I keep thinking about. There were no tire tracks, no footprints leading to the office, just a solid, untouched layer of wet clay. I pulled in slowly, tires skimming the top layer but never leaving much of a mark. There were 6 rooms total. We could see the doors, numbered left to right, 1 through 6. None of the lights were on, but the office door was cracked open slightly, Sean volunteered to check us in. He came back out after a few minutes, holding a brass key on a stiff plastic tag. "Room 4, he said. "She didn't ask for ID, just cash." Ali and I exchanged a look. She was old, Sean said. Didn't say much, just pointed to the logbook and asked for $25. The air outside was cold, not sharp, but damp. Like everything around us had been soaking in a different temperature all day. Room 4 was exactly what you'd expect from a place like that. Thin carpeting, 2 narrow beds, a rattling wall heater, and a dim ceiling bulb with a pull chain. The walls were beige. I remember that clearly. Beige with a faint diamond pattern. The kind of wallpaper that tries to be neutral and ends up being nothing at all. We were tired. None of us really talked. We tossed our stuff down, turned on the TV, which only got one channel, some kind of shopping network, and decided to sleep early. That night, I woke up twice, once around 2:30 a.m. to the sound of dripping. But when I sat up, it stopped, and again at 3:47, according to the glowing red clock. That time it was a knock, just one, not loud, not urgent, just single. I didn't check the door. The next morning we left early. The office was locked. There was no sign of the woman Sean had seen. But that's not what bothered us. What bothered us was the mud. Still thick, still slick. But again, no tire marks, no footprints, not even ours. As if we'd never arrived at all. We didn't talk much on the drive out. Back on the main road, the motel vanished behind the trees. We hadn't even seen another car. Sean eventually asked what time I'd woken up. I told him, around 3:45. He was quiet for a second. Then he said, "I saw someone standing outside." Ali leaned forward from the back seat. "What do you mean?" Sean shrugged. "Not someone, just a shape, outside the window. I didn't look too long. Thought it was a tree." He paused. "But I remember the wallpaper." "What about it?" I asked. "It was floral, purple and blue." "No," I said. "It was beige with diamonds." Ali was staring out the window. "Mine was striped," she whispered. "Green, like old hospital walls." None of us argued. We just let it sit. That night, after dropping Sean off in Rochester, Ali and I stayed at a hotel near Buffalo before heading back to school the next day. It was a chain hotel, clean, modern, bright white sheets and normal beige walls. As I unpacked my bag, something slipped out. A matchbook. It was small, cream-colored and printed with gold foil. Larkspur Motel, room 4. I hadn't taken it. None of us smoked. I didn't even remember seeing one in the room. Inside were 2 matches, but the sulfur tips were missing, torn clean. I didn't mention it to Ali. The next week, Sean texted me out of nowhere. He'd been looking for the motel online. No results, no listing, no address. Even on satellite view, the road ended before the turnoff. No structure visible. He asked if I remembered the shape of the woman he talked to. I didn't. He said he wasn't sure she had a face. I stopped answering his texts after that. Not out of anger, but because I didn't want to know what else he remembered. It was Ali's idea to go back. About a month later, on a Saturday afternoon, she texted me out of nowhere. "I want to see if it's still there." Sean agreed to meet us near Roxbury. None of us used GPS. We followed the same paper map from before, retracing every turn. We found the diner, the post office, the dead gas station, and we found the sign. Sort of. The wooden post was still there, but the sign was gone. Just rusted bolt holes and faded paint. We looked for the gravel road, but there was no gravel, just a new stretch of asphalt, slick and black, like it had been laid recently. No cracks, no markers. Just a smooth curve that led nowhere. We followed it anyway. It looped around a bend, deeper into the woods, but it didn't lead to the motel. It dead-ended in a circle of pine trees. No building, no lot, no sign. We got out of the car, walked around. There was no trace, not even a patch of disturbed earth. Sean started taking photos, pacing the perimeter. I stayed by the car. Then I remembered the glove box. I opened it, and there it was, a key, brass, cold, attached to a red plastic fob. Room 4, Larkspur Motel. I hadn't put it there. None of us had. I called out to the others. They came over, looked at it. No one said anything. Then Ali spoke. "There's a term for this." "For what?" I asked. She paused. "Null space. It's an architectural theory about structures that exist emotionally but not physically. Places that register with memory but not with documents. No permits, no photos, no records. You're saying we imagined it. I'm saying we didn't." Sean dropped his camera into the front seat and sat down. I looked out toward the trees. I don't know what we expected to find, a trick of terrain, a hidden road, but the world had swallowed it clean. We drove home in silence. None of us spoke until we passed the last ridge of trees, and even then, it wasn't until hours later that I dared to check the key again. It was gone, the red fob, the brass, all of it. Just a hollow in the glove box where it had been. Nothing else was missing, just that. I've driven past Roxbury twice since then. There's no motel, no dirt road, just pine trees and silence. But sometimes late at night I still dream about room 4 and the shape outside the window that never knocked again.